Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll see if we're live.
Yeah, I think
know.
we're live right now. And
I'm not a live expert.
I'm not either. This is the first time I've ever done it, and we're just waiting a few minutes while some people recognize that we're going live.
This says we're live, and I've got the app open, so we'll see.
Yeah, maybe we'll start getting some comments. If you guys are seeing this, put some comments in the chats, and we'll give it about, what, you think, 10, 15 minutes before we can get started?
Yeah, we'll give it some.
Can you see?
10 or 15 minutes.
Somebody's live, or is that you?
I think that's me.
Okay.
We're not experts at this.
Yeah, I don't have like a screen up or anything like that showing that we're live.
So. We just have to trust the technology.
We just
technology sucks sometimes.
Yeah, so
we wanted to get together. We thought it'd be cool. I've done some live streams actually on my tiny channel. Josh and his huge channel has never done any live streams. So I twisted his arm and I was like, you got to do a live stream.
Yeah, he convinced me. We were supposed to make a video in the float plane the other day, and yeah, the weather didn't pan out so good, as you can see behind us here.
The weather sucks.
So, and we're going to do something fun with the float plane, do some fishing out of the float plane. I thought maybe, hey, we're already getting some comments. Awesome.
Yeah, nice.
Let's see what you guys are saying.
We'll move that down here.
Spectacles or something. Hey guys, live. Hello everyone. Hello fellas.
Yeah. Hey, it's working.
It's working. Hey, I appreciate you guys joining me. We're going to give it a few minutes before we get started here.
What are we talking about today?
We are talking about the 5 most confusing things for new pilots. And I think you guys are going to enjoy this. We'll give it a few minutes before we go in and talk about the details. But go ahead and start throwing questions in the comments. If we feel like answering them, we will. Not to be mean, but I've never done this before, so I'll answer them as I can, or if maybe it's a question I don't know the answer to, we'll we'll take a look in there.
And this will also be released as a video, so
yeah, we'll release it as a video. Probably will be a collab between Free Pilot Training and VSL or Seth Lake's channel. So yeah, if you guys don't like this chatter beforehand, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, we can edit this stuff out.
Yeah, we can edit this out a little bit. How many people we got up right now?
No.
I'm not used to this.
I'm not like an expert here.
You know, I'm shocked that they let me fly airplanes because I'm kind of dumb.
Yeah, it looks like 24 people.
24, that's a good start. That's a good start. Let's see if we can give it 10 to 15 minutes before we get going too crazy here. But how are you guys doing today? Friday. I know Friday is usually the worst day for me to release a video, so
yeah.
I didn't know how this was going to go. Let's see. How tactfully to tell my flight school to not make me track them down and give some dang lessons. That is a problem, and actually Seth and I were just talking about flight instructors yesterday.
Oh yeah.
I'm about to
upcoming video.
Yeah, actually it's over on my Red Yeti channel, and if you guys haven't checked that channel out, I created another channel called Red Yeti Aviation, and the reason I did that is because I want Free Pilot Training to focus on pilot training, and then I want to get into a little bit other content aviation related with Red Yeti. So if you haven't checked out Red Yeti, you should check that out. And then you should also check Seth Lake's channel out. He does a lot of stuff in preparation for the check ride. And so if you guys are taking any kind of check ride whatsoever, that's really valuable material. So it'll be worth checking out. Wish I had time to wait. I have to catch the vid later. Yeah, we're gonna post this later, so you won't miss anything. You maybe missed this part, I don't know. Maybe we'll leave it in, I'm not sure. You put some of the best information about aviation on your channels. Thank you, I really appreciate that. That's really kind, and
yeah, we're getting some love already.
Yeah, we're getting some love. I'm sure somebody will tell me how much I look like Scott from Kentucky Ballistics. I'm constantly getting that, and so I don't know if you guys saw my post earlier today, but I put that up there because somebody commented after I was just telling Seth yesterday about how often people tell me that. So maybe on my Adventure Men channel I can make a video about not Kentucky Ballistics. That might be kind of fun. How do you feel about those accelerated CFI courses? My friend got his commercial CFI and CFII in 2 weeks. It's crazy. I have mixed emotions about that, but what do you feel about it, Seth?
Let's see. On the, I mean, I've seen them successful. I've seen them where they really just kind of charge you a bunch of money and schedule a check ride for you, and they don't really verify that you're ready. So I've had to issue a few disapprovals going to those accelerated CFI courses. There's a really great one in Denton, Texas at In the Pattern. It's probably the best I've ever seen. And In the Pattern is, one of the top flight schools in the country, in my opinion. And it's won a couple of awards, or several awards with AOPAs. So they do a really good job. But then I've seen others that just, don't do a great job. So your results may vary there.
Compared to other schools, what's kind of the price tier on that? Is it like a higher end? Is it like medium? Is it lower?
I think it's pretty reasonable. They fly out some older 172s, but they have new avionics. So I think it's a good mix of like affordable, cool. It's very affordable training. So I really like that course, and they have an in-house DPE, and then I give some of their check rides. So that's definitely my top pick.
Kevin's on. He said, I've spent a lot of time in that exact room. Excellent place. Yeah, I'm actually doing some flying with Kevin tomorrow, so that'll be cool.
Yeah. We had a question up here on from Cheez It.
Why is high altitude pressure called high altitude pressure? If the pressure gets lower, the higher you go. Yeah, that is one that I'm ashamed to say that somebody messed up whenever they came up with that. But just as you go up in altitude, they're talking about high pressure altitude. So they're talking about altitude way up here. So
but the pressure is actually lower.
But the pressure is lower. I'm sorry. That's just how it is. And it's kind of like a thing when you get to aviation where we try to throw some things out there to what can we do to confuse you more. I don't know why that is, but that's just what we do. How many people we have online now?
We're up to 50.
50, okay.
So
we'll give it a few more minutes here. Maybe if we can get 100 on them, we'll go ahead and get going. But talking about the 5 most confusing things for new pilots, if you didn't already hear. Let's see. Let's take a couple more questions before we get going. How I get my fear of flying solo away. I have everything done, only the solo lessons left, I'm assuming. Yeah, dude, I think everybody has that, like, it feels a little bit scary. Have you done a solo yet? Because what I've noticed is that, so for me, when I was getting my private pilot's license, I didn't feel ready to solo. My instructor was like, hey, you're ready. And I was like, are you sure? And soon after that, I was like, if you think I'm ready, then I guess I'm good. And after that first touch and go, man, I was like on a serious high. Maybe you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I mean, I love solo.
I felt
I was a little nervous, but I mean, mine was unexpected. It seems like a lot of guys are like this, so the older school, maybe current instructors do this, but I hear more of like, I show up to the airport and people's family are there. I'm like, what are you doing here? And they're like, oh, our son's about to solo. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting technique, because when I soloed, I was just doing a lesson with my instructor, and we landed, and he's like, hey, stop right here. And he gets out of the airplane, and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, all right, well, go do 3 takeoffs and landings and come back and meet me at the ramp. I was like, okay, this is happening. I guess. Then when I've soloed people, I do it the same way. I kind of surprise.
Yeah.
And
I guess we're doing it live.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this video right here.
Yeah.
Let's see. I have got my PPL license, ESA, and couldn't really make it without your videos. I'm so grateful to you, sir. You're very welcome. I've got a lot of people who are, come to my channel doing the ESA program, and I actually did a little bit of research, and man, it's a huge hassle to like go down the rabbit hole and produce content that could actually endorse you guys for the written exam. So yeah, I'm glad I can help you. Maybe at some point I can add, ESA stuff. I don't know, but see what else we got here.
think we're leveling off around 50 people. So
Leveling off at 50. Okay, we'll give it, let's say, 6 more minutes here. Your laptop's showing 5:34. We'll give it 6 more minutes. At 5:40, we'll get going. We'll answer a couple more questions here. Let's see.
we can answer Frolic Gamers. He doesn't know who I am, so it's not surprising.
Just so you know, should I say it? This is Tobey Maguire from Spider-Man. Apparently, you get a lot of comments about that.
Yeah.
No, this is Seth Lake. He's a good friend of mine. We're actually in the same unit in Arkansas. We both fly C-130s out of Little Rock, and we became good friends, and we pushed out some videos together. And we started making content. He's a designated pilot examiner. I'm just.
In fact, I gave you your CFI
you
check
did.
ride.
You did.
Yeah. That was what, in like 21 maybe, or 22?
I think it was 20. I don't remember, 20 or 21.
Yeah, 20 or 21. It was pretty. It's been a few years.
The funny thing about my CFI check ride, I remember this because I actually took off out of North Little Rock, and I kid you not, the ceilings were at 1,000 feet exactly, which is right at the bare minimums for getting over there. And so I kind of did a scud run over to do my CFI check ride, and I landed, and you were like, "Well, I mean, you're legal," and so you're like, "I guess we'll do the ground portion and get going soon after." And I kid you not, the TAFs were saying that like the sky was going to be clear and beautiful and this and that. And after we did the ground portion, looked up in the sky and there's this tiny little hole, just big enough to meet the cloud clearances, which we'll talk a little bit about today. And so we popped through this hole in the clouds with barely meeting the cloud clearances. And as soon as we got up above the clouds just disappeared and went away. So it turned out to be a non-event, but it just cracked me up how, typical check ride day, I guess you could say. Standard.
Yeah, something always happens on check ride day. So.
Yeah, somebody said, that's DPE Seth Lake, go watch his videos. You'll dislike him at first and then learn to love him.
I don't know how to feel about it.
That's funny.
Yeah, I'm not as exciting or interactive as Josh's videos. My videos are pretty dry, but the ACS is pretty dry, so I just try to walk you through and talk about things from the examiner's point of view.
Yeah, and it's I think a lot of these topics in aviation can be kind of dry, but I try to make light of it, and I know some people get mad at me about that. But because they're like, you need to take this serious, and I do take it serious. I know a lot of times we joke around and all that, but if you have a little bit of comedy, I think it sticks a little bit better. And don't take life so serious. Nobody gets out alive anyways. So
exactly.
About a month from my check ride, what's the best stuff to practice? Well, you're the designated pilot examiner. What do you think?
I mean, make sure you're putting it all together, and I would start practicing in kind of the sequence that the check ride is going to go. So the check ride is going to start out, obviously, with the oral exam, but the actual flying portion, which I'm sure that's what you're wanting to practice, is you would start out by doing your cross country first. I'd say 99% of examiners are going to have you take off and hack the watch for your first, 1 or 2 points, and then typically, again, this isn't anything written in stone of how we have to conduct it. It's just how most of us conduct it, is you're going to take off with that timing, backing it up with your paper nav log. And then you get to your first, second point, something's going to occur that's going to cause you to handle a loss or diversion type of event. And usually shortly thereafter, we're going to do the unusual attitudes. And so the way I handle that is we get to the second nav point, make sure that you're within plus or minus 5 minutes, which is the ACS standards for that pilotage and dead reckoning portion. I put the foggles on and say, hey, simulated, you've flown into a cloud bank. What do you do? And then we go into the lost portion, which eventually leads to unusual attitudes. And then we do the high work, which is your stalls and falls, like I like to call them. So your stalls, falls, and steep turns. Then emergency descent down to do low work, which is your turns around a point, S turns, rectangular course. And then once we're done with all that, we come back and do our takeoffs and landings. So just getting an idea of how that pacing works and the efficient places for you to do the check ride. I would find like a north point and a south point, depending on the weather and traffic the day of your check ride, so you have a general idea. Because I kind of like my applicants to take a little bit of leadership there as the pilot in command. So when we get out to the runway and they say, hey, you know, I know that the north practice area is pretty busy today, so I know we had, planned on going to the south, but once I get done with my cross-country aspect, I'd like to maneuver up to, XYZ location because I know that'll be, clearer for us. And that shows me that you've got good situational awareness and you're acting like a pilot in command.
When we were going through pilot training for the Air Force, I remember that was actually a big part of our check rides, especially in the T6, is where they were like, hey, we want to see that you use good common sense for energy management. And so a lot of times we would start out with the maneuvers up above, and then we'd do the maneuvers and then kind of, fall down and do the other maneuvers that were down low. And then eventually, they were like, it doesn't make sense for you to do, I don't know, like do your steep turns down here and then climb up, use a little bit of common sense. So
yeah,
I think a lot of that comes into play. What about, we're about to get started here, but let me finish up by asking this question because I'm curious now that we've talked about this. So for that question, what kind of, you think the short field landing is kind of the biggest thing that is kind of a hardest for students
maybe
to,
the
on
crux
the check
of
ride?
the check ride.
Yeah, I always kind of wondered that because I remember, I mean, I hit my spot, but I remember I was really nervous about it when I was getting my private pilot's license. But if I would say there's one thing to focus on, I kind of feel like that might be it.
The landings in general, the pattern entry can get interesting.
Yeah.
Because you're nervous with the DPE in there, even though I hate that, but it's just fact of life. And so if there's other people in the pattern, it's kind of sequencing yourself in. And here's where my last bit of advice is: make sure the last few flights you do before your check ride, you tell your instructor, do not intervene, do not provide any instruction unless I'm legitimately about to cause a safety of flight issue.
Yeah.
Because even if your instructor is giving you just these little nudges like, hey, why don't you go right 5 degrees and that'll help us get into the pattern, they just made that decision for you, not you. And on the day of the check ride, I will not say anything. So if you're beelining right into a dangerous situation, I'm going to let you take it pretty far until it's the point where, okay, this is going to be unsafe, my controls, and then I'm going to have to issue a disapproval. So being able to operate autonomously without the instructor giving you that feedback, that's a really important thing to do before your check ride. And the instructor means well, right? They're over there coaching you like they should be, but they need to learn when to step back and just evaluate, because you don't want to be the first time you're being evaluated on the actual check ride. So.
Yeah, that's probably one of my weak points, to be honest, is like I just want to tell everybody everything, and then towards the end it's like,
we want to be helpful,
Yeah, no, you're going to have to figure this out on your own.
Yeah.
All right, I appreciate all the comments that are already rolling in here. But we're going to, without further ado, we're going to get started with Free Pilot Training's first ever live stream. I've got Seth Lake with me, who, if you guys have already been joining us a little bit to get the algorithm juices going, if you will. He's a designated pilot examiner out of Russellville, Arkansas. Did my CFI check ride, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
4 or 5, yeah, I think it's been,
But
like
great wealth of knowledge. Like he's well known for the aceguide, which if you guys don't have that, it's a great document that basically interactive tool that you can use throughout your career as a pilot. And so I really appreciate you, being on this live stream, helping me just,
this is fun.
Make it a little bit more interactive than me just looking at comments and kind of talking to you guys. But maybe we can make this more of a thing in the future, because, man, I'm really bad at technology, and so I'll get better, I promise. But I don't know why they made me a pilot, but we'll get there. All right, so the 5 most confusing things for new pilots. Now, we did a little bit of research before we came into this live stream, and there's some really interesting things that looks like you guys are struggling with. I came up with this idea because I think a few of you guys had commented or something and said, hey, can you just go over some of the things that, the most confusing things for new pilots? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I take all those comments, and I promise you guys, I'm not ignoring you. I just have a million things going right now. And so I get to them when I get to them. So without further ado, I think the first thing that we've seen on our list here is airspace equipment requirements and VFR weather requirements. So I'll let you kind of get the ball rolling here, Seth, and kind of give your thoughts on this confusing thing for new pilots.
Yeah, and it's a broad category. You've got multiple overlapping things hitting here. You've got airspace, time of day matters, the type of aircraft that you're in matters. You've got lateral boundaries, you've got vertical boundaries, you've got the type of operation that you're doing. All of those can have an impact on the weather requirements, your operational requirements, the type of equipment you have to have on board. And so it's easy to get overwhelmed because, I imagine it's like that meme with the guy that has the pictures and the red strings and it's like his hair's all messed up because he's going crazy. That's what it can feel like. Yeah, that's what it can feel like when you're trying to decipher these airspace regulations.
And unfortunately, a lot of this stuff you don't realize until later on when you're going for your instrument rating, but a lot of this airspace is built for instrument requirements. And so what they do, and you'll see like the Class Charlie, how it steps down like the wedding cake. Well, guess what those instrument pilots are doing? Well, they're coming in at an angle like this. And so those requirements are basically built for those guys to fly approaches. And that way you don't have some dingleberry flying where he shouldn't be, like at the approach into that runway. Well, there's a little bit more protection for those guys. And so that's why this airspace exists, and why the minimum weather exists.
Yeah. And I like to use another pastry analogy other than the cake. I like to use the cookie dough analogy. So that's the cookie dough is like your Class G. So all over the whole country, there's essentially this layer of Class G, and that's kind of the baseline airspace. And then where anything's really busy, you take a cookie cutter and you cut out part of that Class G, where either it's not there, that'd be like a hole, the cookie that you've cut out, or you can just depress down the cookie dough a little bit where it's a little bit thinner. But the going in assumption is Class G is everywhere 1200 and below. Some places it's 700, and then some places it doesn't exist at all. And then you've got your other layers on top of that build on top. So you got your Class E, which is kind of your basic level of controlled airspace, and then your D, C, and B. But the point is, knowing where all those airspaces, the reason that's important, and I'm all about the practical reason of why this is important, is you have to know what equipment that you need. Yeah. And then you have to know what your weather requirements are to operate in that airspace.
And this is what, it took me years to realize this, but when I look at equipment requirements and, going into airspace, one of the big ones for me is Class Delta. Well, what do you need to go into Class Delta? Well, you only need two-way radio communication. And that seems just like an arbitrary thing, but what you have to realize about Class Delta is that a lot of times there's no radar services. If a Class Delta is standing alone, there's no radar. So why would you need ADS-B? Why would you need a transponder? Well, you don't, because those towers can't really see those guys anyways. Now there's new technology out there with ADS-B and TIS-B. So a lot of these Class Delta towers do have the ability to look at those airplanes, but for the most part, they're blind. And especially you'll get some airfields that don't have quite as much money, and they don't have as good of equipment, but you do, for the most part, that's why the airspace regulations are the way they are.
Yeah. And really, you kind of have two things that you're dealing with here. You've got your legal answer, like you have to know the regs, because the only safe assumption that you can do is that the pilots that you're out there flying with are doing the minimum required. You can't assume that they're doing anything extra. So if you're in airspace that doesn't require a transponder or radio, some aircraft there are not going to have a transponder or a radio. They're going to be completely invisible, basically, unless you're looking outside. So if you're one of those pilots that relies on iPad for all your traffic, then you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation. So,
Yeah.
and then there's the risk management answer. So that's the legal. That's why you need to know these rules, is so you know what could be the lowest common denominator you're flying with. And then your risk management is you want to, personally, I would want to carry as much equipment as possible to enhance my essay and let other people know where I'm at. So I would want a transponder, a radio, ADS-B, and then kind of the nice to haves. You know, if I've got TCAS and TAWs, you know, that's even better. Anything on there to build my situational awareness.
Yeah, and this is where it's good to, you know, it's not you don't necessarily have to have the regulations memorized, but having like a, you know, the FAR aim on your iPad, especially like the aceguide, where, you know, it's really easy. Thumbs up we get saying that we're back.
Power fluctuation.
Okay. Okay, we're a little delayed, but I think we're coming back. All right, smash that like button if you guys are reading us.
Okay, yeah, we're back on.
Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulties. This is why we're making a live stream today, because yeah, we're going to do some float plane stuff, and this is not quite VFR pattern weather.
It is float plane weather. We could use the float plane on the runway.
Thank you. You guys are letting me know we're back. Awesome. I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, so tabbing out your FAR aim, the aceguide is a good option. Also, so there's a few regulations that are really good. You got the 91-155, and I realize we're talking about a few different things at once here.
You want to pull up the
yeah, you can go ahead and
capture?
pull up that. So this is actually a free product I have on freepilottraining.net, and this actually is some of the things. And actually, this is a really big part of what you could potentially get asked on your check ride, and really what you should know in general, required items for VFR flight. And so you've got the document requirements there. You've got the required inspections. And actually, one of the things I need to change on this is I need to add the regulations so it's a little bit easier for you guys to go find those. But, you know, VFR day equipment requirements down there a little bit lower, where it says tomato flames, that's 91-205. The required inspections, like I said, and then the VFR night requirements. Now, there's a lot more stuff that you're going to have to know for the check ride, but this is like, I'd say this is a huge part.
Yeah, not much more. I mean, not, you know, if you watch my stuff, you know I don't love tomato flames, but that's basically just pulling from 91-205. Yeah. So the 91-205, but I mean, really the required inspections here, that covers most of the stuff. We're not going in and building the aircraft necessarily, or picking it apart piece by piece. So this basic overview is actually really good. If you've got this kind of in a checklist format for your check ride, then that would be that'd be more than enough.
Honestly, what I need to do now, this is actually something kind of good that a lot of people don't know. I don't have one here, but if you have a physical copy of the FAR aim, I love the FAR aim, you know, in ForeFlight, but if you have a physical copy of the FAR aim, I think it's the ASA version, actually has like private pilot reading assignments in it, and which is actually really handy because basically anything that relates to private pilots or anything that relates to, well, I think it has a list for basically all pilots. I think they even have it for commercial and that sort of thing too. So if you don't have a paper version, that's actually a really good thing to get just so you could have that. Because I don't know if you guys have seen my premium ground course, but I have a lot of reading assignments. And I used a lot of the reading assignments out of there because basically they all apply. And so that's a really good option. I don't know why they don't put it in the digital copy, but they don't, probably to make more money, I'm guessing. But anyway, yeah, so before we move on, one of the other things that's kind of part of this, the basic VFR weather minimums, and we kind of hinted about this, how this can be confusing, basically when you are dealing with weather in all these different airspaces. You just have to think about how busy the airspace is. So like in Class Echo, below 10,000 feet, you know, you got your 3 Cessna 152s, and there's a million little things out there that, you know, can help you remember these things. I like the 3 Cessna 152s. I know that's kind of dumb, but and 91 155 is where you can find this, and it's a really easy reference. Like, one thing about ForeFlight is you can tab these references pretty quick, and you can find them pretty fast for your checkride. But if you think about it logically, so for me, Class Golf, for example, if you look at how Class Golf kind of steps down near like these smaller airports, and you can kind of see it with these hazy magenta lines going around the airfield. There's a reason why those things step down, and I got a bunch of radar stuff here on the screen. But what you'll notice with a lot of these, I don't have a screen mirroring here, but what you'll notice with a lot of these airports with the hazy magenta rings is that they have little squares jutting out of them a lot of times. And the reason for this is because instrument approaches come into these runways, and so basically instrument pilots are making long straight ins to these runways, and because of that, that airspace for Class Golf is down lower, so there's less weather clearance, if you will, down in that lower airspace because of that, because there's less likely to be an instrument pilot down there. And if you get up above that Class Golf, then you start getting into Class Echo, where there's more instrument pilots, basically. I'm not saying there won't be instrument pilots flying in the clouds in Class Golf, but it's a little bit more rare. So that's why these clearances exist. So when you start thinking of it in these terms, then yeah, 1 statute mile and clear of clouds, it kind of makes sense because people are making a straight in for that north-south runway there. That's why that little area right there is jutted out.
So that little keyhole there, what we can kind of anticipate is, I don't know anything about this airport. I just pulled it up. And so this little keyhole in the Class Echo, and this is one of the cookie cutter analogy, when the Class Echo just presses down on Class Golf. So that shaded magenta, that just means that the Class Golf inside of that area goes down, or only goes up to 700 feet instead of 1,200 feet. And so what we can assume is that there is actually an approach that comes in from the south there. So if we look at our RNAV approaches here for, what is this?
Looks like Bristow.
So there is an approach to runway 36, and sure enough, it comes in, and that's basically protecting that approach corridor from the south to the north. Now, the reason they don't have a keyhole to the north probably is, I would assume that this airspace was created a long time before, or a lot longer before RNAV approaches came about. So I'm betting that there was just an approach, only one approach in the past when they created the airspace.
Well, and I think what we're starting to see now with all these new RNAV approaches is you'll see more of these hazy magenta rings around these airports because of these instrument approaches that didn't used to exist. Like, I flew out of Veneta for the longest time. I know you guys messaged me a lot about, oh, you're up in Veneta. Yeah, I was there a long time ago. But that airport didn't have any instrument approaches for the longest time. And really no airport did. None of these small airports did. And with the advent of GPS approaches, like, that opened up a lot of airspace. And so what you get is the Class Golf, you know, only going up to 699, because, I mean, how scary would that be if you flew straight in, you know, you're on instruments, and next thing you know, there's a pilot, you know, another pilot right there on short final, you know, I don't know, scud running or something, because the cloud clearances are 1 statute mile and clear of clouds. So that's the reason why all this exists. And to me, when I understand why, things start making a lot more sense.
Yeah, I think I had the wrong screen pulled up there. Sorry.
Well, yeah, we're all showing you guys this.
It's like, wait, so there's the keyhole there, and then the approaches, the runway 36 and runway 18. So that runway 36 was probably the original, so it went into the north.
Yeah.
And so you can see this hold pattern here. going to the north.
It probably has to do too with the precision approach being to the north, and they may just have like a non-precision going south. So basically, they would come in at more of like a 3-degree glide slope, basically all the way down, versus like a dive and drive type approach.
Yeah,
that could possibly be the reason too. But yeah, what questions you got before we move on to the next one? Let's take one quick question, and we'll move on to the next topic here. How quick are you guys with your chats here? Let's take a quick look at one of your questions, and we'll move on to the next topic.
They want to see me give you a check ride. That would be a fun video.
So we actually talked about this, and one of the things, I don't know if you guys can see it. No, you can't see it. But there's actually a simulator right beside us here. And we talked about giving a check ride in the simulator. We thought that would be kind of funny.
That would be a good one.
Apparently, I didn't know this until I was talking to Seth, but you can't legally film check rides. But if I'm not actually
we could do a mock check ride.
Yeah, we could probably do a mock check ride. So that would be kind of fun. If I get enough comments saying we should do that, maybe we'll make that a future video. I mean, I do have access to these Piper Cherokees over here.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do that.
All right, ready to go on to the next topic?
Yeah, let's go on to the next topic. Pilot compensation and holding out. And I have to admit, this one is really confusing for everybody, including commercial pilots, because you were telling me some things that are pretty interesting, and there might be a lot of people breaking the law.
Yeah.
Even
there definitely
for commercial
is.
pilots.
And it's easy to do. So I put this on here because this is like the most confusing subject. I've got some content on my channel to talk about basically the compensation and holding out. And I've actually had an aviation attorney, and I'm planning on interviewing somebody from the NBAA, which is the Business Association for Aviation. At any rate, the reason this is so confusing is multi-layered here. I think the main reason that a lot of private pilots run into it is they're being taught by CFIs that have never operationally really used any compensation or holding out. And that's not their fault. It's just typically, if you're a flight instructor, the only type of compensation that you've gotten is the compensation you get for basically being a CFI.
Yeah.
But you've never gone out there and you've never worked for a company doing Part 91 pilot services. That's just kind of rare. So it's basically being taught by CFIs who are largely insulated from the real world compensation scenarios.
Yeah, I think the FAA, don't they kind of view CFIs as not actually getting paid? There's something I read.
Technically, yes. That's a whole other subject that's confusing. The reason it is considered compensation because that is an exemption in the Part 119. And so 119 Echo lists flight instruction as a carve-out, or you don't need an air carrier certificate. So they do look at it as a commercial activity. But the fact that you're being paid, you're actually being paid for your training, your teaching, not flying. That's why you don't have to have a Class 2 medical. So that's kind of a legal interpretation there. But anyway, basically by the time you become a commercial pilot, you haven't studied compensation at all, and it gets dumped on you all at once, often by instructors who don't really fully understand it themselves.
Yeah.
And that just leads to some problems there.
Yeah, I mean, because I know when I was going through my private pilot certifications, you know, we all learn 61, 113, which is your privileges and limitations. And so we kind of get taught about, you know, sharing, I can't think of that, sharing compensation, sharing.
Cost sharing?
Yes, cost sharing, thank you.
Pro rata cost
and
sharing.
then FAR 61, 133, which talks about the commercial pilot's privileges and limitations. But the interesting thing is, like, I think a lot of people think, like, well, I'm a commercial pilot now I can go make money and just haul my friends around and, you know, charge a fortune to do this. And I think a lot of times we get ourselves in trouble. We could potentially get ourselves in trouble because, yeah, we're doing things that maybe aren't quite legal.
Yeah, and so this works really well with scenarios. So let's talk about some scenarios. I see commercial students that really kind of overthink it, and they talk themselves into knots, basically, that telling someone you're a pilot is holding out, because they heard holding out is basically advertising. And so if you tell somebody that you're a pilot, that's technically holding out, so you can't do that. And that brings up the the pilot secret society fallacy, where if you want to get a job as a pilot, you put a resume together, right? And you literally hold that resume out and you give it to a company you want to work for or an individual you want to work for. Well, that's holding out. And if that form of holding out was illegal, that means that before you could apply for a job, you would have to first get a Part 119 air carrier certificate. Does that make sense at all? No, that doesn't make sense. And that's not the case here. So the type of holding out that's actually illegal is holding out a service, which means a plane and a pilot. So if you're holding out a transportation package, which means a plane and a pilot to go somewhere, point A to B, then that is holding out. That's the holding out that's illegal.
Yeah.
There's other forms of holding out that are legal that you can do without an air carrier certificate.
And there's one of them in particular is flight seeing. Like if you started a flight seeing company, I do know that you could actually just take people and get paid to do some flight seeing, because actually when I was up in Alaska, I looked at starting an air charter company, and it was like, oh my goodness, this is a huge ordeal. And it's like a 2-year waiting list.
So sightseeing is a great point. That's a carve out in Part 119. So aerial tours is a thing that you can do without an air carrier certificate, but you actually have to have an LOA to do that as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You have to have permission from the FAA to do that. You just don't need an air carrier certificate. So here's another great example. One of the carve-outs is aerial work, and that includes aerial photography. So let's say that you have a airplane, Cessna 172, and a photographer contacts you and says, hey Josh, I'd like to go take some pictures of this property from the air so I can post them on my website or whatever, the client wants them, and you agree to do that. That's totally legal. You don't need any special LOAs. All you need is an airplane with a 100-hour inspection. You need a commercial certificate, pilot certificate, and you need a Class 2 medical. If you have all that, you can go out and do that. Now you're offering the plane, you're offering the pilot, and you could advertise that. You could hold out, and that's legal because that's carved out in Part 119. So that's legal. So you get a relationship going with this photographer, and y'all do these photo shoots all over the county, and then one day the photographer, you're up there taking pictures, maybe 2 or 3 counties over. It'd be like a 3-hour drive to get out there. And she's like, hey, could you land at the local airport? We'll take the courtesy car over because I want to take pictures on the ground of this property as well as aerial, pictures. And you're thinking, well, yeah, that's not a big deal. That's a good runway there. We're in the airplane. It'll save us both some time driving. So you land there, you get in the courtesy car, you drive out to the property. She takes pictures of it on the ground. You go back to the airport, you get in the plane, fly back home. Now nothing's really changed a whole lot, but you actually just broke the law because you provided transportation from point A to point B. You didn't do a nonstop flight.
Interesting.
You provided her transportation, and so then, as soon as you did that, you met all 4 criteria of a common carrier. You transported somebody from point A to B. You held out because you were showing a willingness to do that, and you were compensated, and you carried a passenger. So you got the transportation, the passenger, the cargo, the holding out, everything, and now that's illegal.
This sounds pretty complicated.
Yeah, but I like that analogy or that story, the scenario, because it doesn't sound illegal. What I just explained doesn't sound like it was dangerous, and honestly, it really wasn't. It doesn't sound like an illicit activity, but yet it was illegal. So I think that's part of the reason why pilots have struggled understanding this, because we kind of think of illegal things as like illicit activities, like it would be obvious, like we're running drugs somewhere, or we're taking stolen goods. Like that scenario right there doesn't sound crazy. That's just a regular scenario, but yet it's it's illegal.
And I think this is because I remember when I first I got my commercial license. I remember a lot of people were like, oh, they should start an Uber for flying. And the more you dig into this, there's no way that could ever happen. Because that would be awesome. But yeah, there's just no way with all the regulations. If somebody were to if they had a question about something like this, where could we go to find more information about if something was illegal? What's probably the best resource for something like this?
Oh, that's a good question. So probably
I know you put out a lot of videos.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up hopefully the correct screen this time.
Don't thumbs down if he pulls up the wrong screen.
Yeah, exactly.
I promise there's nothing weird on these screens.
Yeah. Let's see.
Looks like you guys are enjoying this. It says, this is so helpful. Have your instructor send you up with a different instructor for a mock exam. That will help reduce the nerves. Oh, you guys are talking to each other. Yeah, hit up those comments. How many people we got online right now? Let's take a quick look. That doesn't really say.
Yeah. So while you're doing that, I've got the aceguide pulled up. The best advisory circular out there for illegal charter, all that stuff, is this 61-142. And so I've got the aceguide pulled up right here. This is sharing aircraft operating expenses, and I know this may sound like, well, hey Seth, this is kind of targeted at sharing expenses for private pilots, so why does it matter for commercial pilots? The reason is it has a whole section here on what is holding out. And there's some legal precedents there and some plain language paragraphs that describe holding out a little bit. So this is actually a good primer for even a commercial pilot. But definitely one of the better advisory circulars that the FAA has put out to help describe, hey, this is appropriate ways that you can be compensated as a private pilot versus an illegal way. And just because you're a commercial pilot doesn't mean that you can't also exercise private pilot privileges. So that's why it's important to also have a good understanding of that sharing aircraft expenses. So
yeah,
that would be one of the better resources that I think are out there.
Yeah, somebody said we got 54 watching now. That checks with what I'm seeing. So yeah, I appreciate you guys sticking around. Let's see here. What else we got? Do we want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think we've. If you want more on that, you go over to my channel. I have several episodes where I talk about
holding out and stuff.
Yeah, illegal charter, all that stuff.
And what was that advisory circular again?
61-142.
61-142. And those advisory circulars are awesome. Anytime like you just can't find the information you need, a lot of times the advisory circular will answer your questions exactly. I know when I was making a video on traffic patterns and stuff, even just that, there's a lot of good stuff in those advisory circulars. So be sure you guys check that out. What is the next one here? ATC communications. I think we can all agree that ATC communications can be quite confusing.
Yeah.
And we're going to stick with ATC communications in this topic because when it comes to like CTAF calls and untowered calls, really the big thing is just making sure other people know where you are and talking to each other for those. But ATC communications, and there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah,
what do you
lot of stress. I've got this just a few weeks ago. I was at DCA, and this was on an airline trip. So I'm an airline pilot. I'm a first officer at Southwest, and so I'm on the ground at DCA, and we're at the gate, and we have to get our pushback call, which is a relatively simple call, but DCA was just booming that day.
Yeah.
And we literally took a 20-minute late departure because that's how long it took communicating with ground. There was no pauses in the frequency.
Wow.
And the stress was just dialed up. And now I've got thousands of hours. I've flown all over. I've been flying for many, many years. And as a professional pilot, even I get stressed out sometimes with ATC communication. So you are completely justified feeling a little stressed out when it comes to talking on the ATC. So you should feel zero shame here about finding this hard if you're a new pilot. Talking to ATC can be hard. So.
Yeah, when I look at, actually probably one of the best references for talking on the radios is actually the AIM. There's a lot of information on phraseology and stuff in the AIM. Specifically, Chapter 4, you've got Section 2, Section 3, and Section 4. And probably one of the biggest things that helped me, and it's funny because in pilot training for the Air Force, we didn't use the AIM, but we used a lot of the principles from the AIM. And so one of the biggest things is basically knowing who you're talking to and then using the appropriate phraseology. And then also kind of knowing what to expect when you call them up. Because the first couple times you call up ATC, it's going to be a total surprise and you're going to be like, you know, I know how it is. I remember in pilot training, they were like, we'd get vectors sometimes and they'd be like, turn left 270, climb and maintain 3,000 feet. And then I'd be like, turn left 257, climb and maintain 2,500. And I want to read you guys something because this was super helpful for me when it comes to reading back instructions. This is actually from the AIM in 4-4-7. And this particular, it's not a regulation. It's just the handbook, I guess, what you call. But they talk about what you should read back when you talk to ATC. It says pilots of airborne aircraft should read back those parts of ATC clearances and instructions containing altitude assignments, vectors, or runway assignments as a means of mutual verification. The readback of the numbers serves as a double check between pilots and controllers and reduces the kind of communication errors that occur when a number is either misheard or incorrect. So now I know this is specifically talking about readback, but when I'm talking to ATC, I'm actually thinking about making a video on this because military pilots exclusively use this. You need to be thinking about what kind of information do they need from me right now to, one, identify me on radar. Because if you're going into like a class Charlie or a class Bravo, they're trying to find you. And think about that for a second. If you're coming into class Bravo and they have no clue where you are, what do you think what's the first thing they're gonna wanna know? Well, first of all, they're gonna wanna know who you are, and they're also gonna wanna know where you are and what your altitude is as well. And then they're also gonna want to know what you want. If they don't at least know those three things, then basically they're gonna ask you for them right afterwards. So be thinking about that before you go into this airspace. So what I'll typically do is I'll usually talk to him first. I'll say, well, here in Little Rock approach, Cherokee 7348 Juliet, and just stop there. Maybe they're busy. A lot of times they'll be on different frequencies, talking on multiple frequencies, so they might not pick you up right away. So, if you spill out this big, long radio call, they might not catch it all the first time, and then you get to do it all over again. So, yeah. Let them come back to you, and then basically tell them what you want, and tell them where you are. And if you don't say something, it's fine. But then the big thing is reading back the numbers, like I just talked about. Like one thing in particular is altitude. Well, altitude's a number. Well, what's the altimeter? Well, the altimeter is a number. Those sort of things. What's the transponder, the squawk, that's a number. They need to hear those things back because they're trying to it's a mutual verification, so they want to make sure that you heard the correct thing so they can find you faster. So anytime I hear a number, I want to say that back. But I also want to say my call sign back so they know for sure who they're talking to. I don't know how many times I've talked to them and they've come back with the wrong call sign. Well, I need to clarify that and get the right call sign to them. So and the more you do this, the more it's like, oh, they are looking for me. Oh, well, I need to put in this right transponder. If I don't tell them this right transponder, put in this right transponder, then guess what? They're not going to say radar contact. They're going to say ident because they don't know where you are, and you're pushing the ident button, so they can help, you can help them find you.
Yeah, anticipation's a huge thing, and this extends from your private pilot days to when you're going to be an airline pilot someday or a professional pilot. So let's say you're 20 miles out from an airport and ATC clears you to a fix, and it's not on your flight plan. You don't know exactly what they said. If the frequency's busy, you may not have time to ask them how to spell that, so now you're just kind of lost. And once you become experienced, you realize, okay, when I get close to airport, if I'm on an IFR flight plan, there's a really good chance that ATC is going to clear me direct to an initial approach fix or a final approach fix. Mm-hmm. So an experienced pilot would know that, and so you're kind of anticipating. Yeah. And so rather than panicking of, oh man, I just got a fix, I don't know what it is, you just calmly, oh, let's pull up the approach plate. I bet it's the runway we're using, I bet it's the final approach fix or initial approach fix for that ILS. And you pull it up, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be your point.
Actually, a pro move, if you guys do much filing for IFR or even VFR, if you file, like the last point in your flight plan, if you file an initial approach fix, they should know that you want that approach for that runway. So if you file that initial approach fix, you'll typically get that approach if that's the one you want.
Yeah.
So.
And the other thing I'll throw in that's kind of a more advanced thing on the radio that you need to start practicing as early as possible is build that situational awareness of other people on frequency. So if you're in the pattern, being able to build kind of that mental image of, okay, I hear 3 different airplanes and I kind of have a general idea, this one's on base, this one's on downwind, this one's 5 miles south. You can start building that mental image of how you're going to sequence yourself in. And what happens is once you practice that as a private pilot, as you grow to a professional pilot, the same thing happens. You check in on frequency, and the first thing you hear before, after you check in is ATC that you just checked into starts giving somebody holding instructions.
Yeah.
So that's when, okay, cockpit gets quiet. I'm heads down in the FMS trying to figure out, okay, what's our holding fuel? What's our divert options? Where are the delays? Maybe I need to contact dispatch. Captain's over there working on, fuel situation. And that way, if we get holding instructions, then we're prepared. We're not reacting to a radio call. We're using it to build that situational awareness. So you're building that kind of skill set as a private pilot.
Yeah, if you're reacting to radio calls, then you're going to mess them up. But if you already kind of know what's coming, like when I call up approach and I tell them where I am and what I want and who I am, I know that one of the first calls is going to be a transponder. I know that they're going to give me an altimeter setting, and then once they find me, they're either going to find me or they're not. So they're going to say radar contact or they're going to say ident. They might ask me for my altitude, but just kind of knowing what to expect. And actually, when we were in pilot training, I'm sure you did this too, but I remember for the Air Force, they literally painted a runway on the floor and they drew out a pattern, and we would take turns being ATC, and you'd be shocked at how often you, how good you get at like predicting what the tower is going to say, or even you could do this with an approach controller too, and you guys can take turns being approach controllers, because it's I'm reading these comments. Sorry, it's hard to do 2 things at once here. Practice what you preach. I didn't see any 7600s posted in that chat when my feed went down. I'm sorry.
We should have squawked 7600.
But
we were on 121.5. We were actually transmitting this whole podcast on the emergency frequency 121.5.
First of all, we were busy aviating and then navigating. Sorry if we didn't communicate fully. Yeah. But so what I was saying is, we would draw these runways out on the ground and we would take turns, and you'd be shocked at how many dividends? How many dividends that would pay. Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm not a grammatical expert. So you would be shocked at how much that can help you just by, just walking around the floor and just being like, tower. The first thing in my head is pop cheat 3, cheat 2-1. 7348 Juliet left base 25, and then the tower will say cheat 2-1 left 25 cleared the option. Clear the option, 2-5.
Yeah. Yeah, you could do this at your home airport. If you're an instructor, if you want to practice, you could kind of do this yourself. But I would say the best way to practice this is actually do it on a bicycle instead of walking. Fast. Because you can't just stop on a bicycle. You have to always keep moving. And that's how an airplane is. If you get lost, you can't just stop. You've got to keep riding. So if I were to have a student practice this, I would have them practice it on a scooter or a bike. And it's like, hey, you can't put your feet down. You've got to make the appropriate radio calls. And if you get lost, hey, tough luck. You're moving at 100 knots, whether you want to or not.
Yeah, I'm thinking what's that thing you ride?
The one wheel?
Yeah, I was thinking the one wheel. People are cracking me up in these comments. Don't lie, you're busy meowing on 122.5. You don't know for sure that was me, by the way. There's an IFR point here. Meow.
Meow.
Direct
yeah,
meow.
there is meow.
And I
Little
keep
Rock.
hearing
Yeah.
it. It's just
I've gone direct to meow.
oh, it's just
So I've meowed on the radio legally.
legally, yeah. Wait, but is it illegal to meow on the radio?
I think so. It drives me crazy.
It does me too.
It drives me crazy.
Okay, sorry. We're
won't
getting
get
off
on that.
topics there.
We won't get.
Did we beat that horse to death or what?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's good. And we got a question here that I would kind of like to handle.
Yeah.
We got Frolic Gamers. He has a check ride, or she has a check ride, and my DP, they're their first applicant, and so you're going to have a Fed riding along. Any tips? And my main tip for you is actually Feds are surprisingly easy. If you look at the data, Feds issue less disapprovals per capita than DPEs. And the Fed is not there to evaluate you. The FAA inspector is there to evaluate the DPE, and they'll make that clear in their briefing. I think this is actually kind of a benefit for the applicant. Some guys might not see it that way, but it is added stress for sure. And the DPE is going to be first off, if they're a new examiner, that's going to be a little more difficult anyway, because they've never given an actual FAA check ride before. So the stress is going to be higher, but just know that inspector is there to evaluate the examiner. They're not there to examine you. But yeah, there is a little bit better, a higher degree of evaluation there is what it feels like. The benefit is a lot of times, I make it a practice, if you have to get observed by the FAA, I don't charge for the check ride because of that added stress. So there should be at least a discount, and I give all of those check rides, I don't charge for them because it is so much extra stress. So that may be a benefit.
I think I need a check ride soon.
Yeah.
All right, next most confusing thing for new pilots, TAFs and METARs.
Yeah, TAFs and METARs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pound out some comments, guys. What are your questions on TAFs and METARs? And I have to admit, they're pretty confusing when you're first getting started and you're looking at a bunch of gibberish. But what kind of resources do we have for the TAFs and METARs? I know when if you want to pull it up, when I did my video on TAFs and METARs on free pilot training, one of the resources that I share is there's a decode key, and this is a really good one. It actually, so it shows you like all the codes, and there it is, BR for Baby Rain. If you guys like my song.
So here's our decoder list here.
Yeah, so these are all the codes right here, and if you scroll down a little bit, basically almost anything that you see on the TAF and METAR list is going to be here. So, you've got DZ for drizzle, FG for fog there, first for first observation after a break in coverage at a manual station. So basically this makes it dummy proof. And one thing to keep in mind about TAFs and METARs is that it's all based on Zulu time and Zulu day. So when you look at those, I don't have my watch on today, but I always have a Zulu time on my watch, and that's one of the advantages of having a smartwatch is that you can look at Zulu time. When I'm listening to the AWOS, I always listen to Zulu time and then just look at my watch. Oh, it's a fresh AWOS. It's not stuck on whatever time that was.
Yeah, that's the biggest takeaway for me, or piece of feedback for you if you're training or preparing for a check ride, is I would do all of your planning in Zulu, because I had to issue a disapproval one time. It really kind of it hurt because it was such a simple mistake, but no matter how many times I asked the question, they just doubled down on we did not need an alternate. And what was happening is they had subtracted 4 hours instead of 5 hours trying to do the local time Zulu conversion.
Yeah.
And so the TAF line clearly required an alternate that was within an hour of our arrival time, but because they had done the calculation wrong, we were on a VFR line that didn't require an alternate. And I asked them several times to verify, hey, you're saying we don't need an alternate, right? You're very sure. And I gave them multiple attempts. And because they did that calculation wrong, I had to issue a disapproval because we legally needed an alternate. And that's kind of a hard way to learn that lesson. And I really don't like doing that, but that's just a core competency you have to have as an instrument pilot. So what I would recommend is do all your planning in Zulu. You can actually change ForeFlight. If a lot of people use ForeFlight as a planning software, Garmin Pilot's the same way. You can change the system time to read in Zulu time, and that's what I would recommend. Is just do all of your planning in Zulu, and like Josh was saying, have a watch that can read Zulu time. That way you're not having to do that conversion, because that's just tripped up so many pilots when you try to convert.
That's the one thing that is a huge bonus about a smartwatch, and I really want to answer this question right here in just a second, but one of the huge benefits about a smartwatch is it's so easy to be like, it's 1800 Zulu or whatever.
Right.
This question I want to get to because this is probably one of the most confusing things, because one thing that the TAFs and METARs on ForeFlight don't give you is these equipment codes at the end. So somebody asked, do you really need to know all the equipment codes at the end, or is it knowing how to read the actual weather info enough? And so I brought up that, that guide, and there's a lot of codes there, but if you'll scroll down to the bottom on this, a lot of those codes are down at the bottom on this guide right here. Yeah, it's close to the bottom. A lot of these, like icing codes. So what they are is like, if there's turbulence in the forecast, if there's icing in the forecast, there's like a bunch of numbers and stuff. Like, if you were to look at that, a lot of times it doesn't make any sense. So this guide is actually just kind of a quick reference guide, but the other really good guide is the Aviation Weather Manual. Do you have access to bring that up real quick?
Yeah, I can pull that up.
And actually, is this the interactive guide on? So actually, I'm releasing a interactive weather guide on my website on freepilottraining.net. This particular guide right here that you guys are looking at is actually the ACE guide. And so my weather guide is a part of that. If you guys are interested in the interactive weather guide for $5, you can find this information really, really easily. And so if you want to bring up, the kind of the decoder ring,
I guess. All we have to do is go to chapter 24, that's observations, and then AWAS, and scroll down a few pages, and what you'll find is this right here. And here's kind of the secret decoder for a METAR. And there's one for TAF here, but this gives you the basic breakdown, and then it specifies it here in table format. But basically this is the source data for the FAA. It's on telling you how to read a METAR or a TAF, is this weather handbook.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people struggle with these, and especially that end code, because I remember I got asked a bunch of those questions when I was going through military flight training. Actually, they were like, well, what do these codes at the end mean? And you really, unless you can memorize those, you really need to have just like a snapshot of these guides and just pull that out and be like, okay, well, it looks like we have icing, and it's at light rime or whatever. And so that's going to be the easiest way to do it. And a lot of these questions you get asked, you don't have to memorize stuff.
No, I'm a big advocate for not memorizing things, because memory is very fallible. And then if you're relying on memory and you don't know where to look it up, then if that information ever changes, and it does, information does change, then you're going to have bad data, because instead of using the current source for that information, you're relying on a memory that's old, fallible, and then it may be not, out of date now. So
yeah, this is a really good question. Why do airports report out METARs if they have an AWAS? So this is because the AWAS actually uses a sensor, and I can't remember what code it is. I think it's an A. If it says AO at the beginning, and then that's like an automated weather observation. But a lot of these aren't automated. So a lot of these come from like a basic weather, like aviationweather.gov. All the TAFs and METARs are funnel from aviationweather.gov, whereas like an AWAS is actually like a sensor on the field. A lot of times, like for the ceilings and stuff, it'll literally, shoot up a laser beam in the air and, see where the clouds are and stuff. And then the difference in that and like ATIS is like, a lot of times for ATIS, like a human being will step out and be like, oh yeah, the clouds look like they're few at 5,000. You know, that, okay, that's good. We'll go ahead and just check the box on that one. So, yo, free pilot training. All right, welcome guys. We're about like, where are we at right now? Anything else?
All right, we got one here for local flights that you do regularly. Besides the pre-flight action required, do you have a quicker way y'all like to plan for weather instead of a full weather briefing?
Actually, this is a really good question. One of my favorite websites out there is called Windy. Do you have quick access to this?
Well, I'm not a subscriber, so.
Oh, well, you should still be able to. So Windy is, you know, it has all the generic things that you're used to, but probably my favorite feature about Windy, if we can get it to pull up here, is the mediagrams. And because, yeah, you need to legally check the TAFs and the METARs. That is like a legal requirement. And you also need to check, you know, the AWOS and stuff once you actually get in the plane. And a lot of these, like if you get on ForeFlight, you can actually call the AWOS or the ATIS. A lot of times they'll have phone numbers you can call. But the mediagrams, can you pull it up on there too?
I think so. I was going to show this. Let's see. All right.
Let's see if I can, I don't know if I have, I hate to bring it up on my phone because like it's pretty small.
So what I have here, while you get that pulled up, I can get Wendy to work. But if you make a login at 1-800-WXbrief.com, you can set a profile up that has your area briefings for the, so I've got 3 airports that I fly at a lot and then an airplane that I fly. And so I can just do an area brief for Russellville. And then I can do the standard briefing and do a web briefing. And it just pulls up all of the local weather. Let me make sure that this is working here. There we go. All right, so we'll just kind of put it right here. So you can see our beautiful faces as we go through this briefing. But this is the way that I do an area briefing, and it just gives me the local area briefing for that one particular airport. And in addition to the weather, it gives me the NOTAMs that I need. And I got cloud cover, and notice how it's all centered around the airport I'm going to. So this is really useful for local training missions.
Yeah.
The other thing this does, and why I prefer this over, like Wendy gives you good situational awareness, but by clicking this logged that I did this briefing for 20 days.
Oh, okay.
And it ties it to my name and my tail number. So if anything were to happen with, as far as like an FAA violation or something, then I would kind of be covered because I've shown that I did my due diligence. I got a weather briefing for that.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can get.
Yeah, and I think that's good to get the actual weather briefings. And I'm also a huge fan of calling the flight service stations too, because you know that's an awesome resource. And if we don't use those, they're going to go away. I typically do like at least one lesson on the cross countries where we'll call up the flight service station, so you guys can see how useful they are. Oh, is that Wendy?
Yeah, this is Wendy.
Can you click and get the mediagrams?
So let's.
I want to show like, so when I'm looking at weather, really a couple days in advance, and even up to 10 days, Wendy will show you a mediagram for your area.
All right.
You'll
so
have to.
Where's the mediagram?
I'm used to clicking it on the app. So you click get weather. Let me see here. So I'm used to using the app. So basically what I'll do is there a button that says get forecast? Forecast this location. Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, there we go. Okay, and then so you basically click forecast this location, and then what you have right here is just like a generic look at the weather. But if you, down at the bottom, there's a tab that says Mediagram right there, close to the middle.
Oh yeah, right there.
You click that. And so what you see here is like a side profile view of what clouds you can expect in the future. And I can't tell you how accurate this is when it comes to, up to 10 days planning. Windy is probably these mediagrams are probably one of the most accurate things when it comes to like long-term forecasts for cloud planning. And so what you can see here, it's kind of hard for me to see right here in this picture, but it looks like Monday, Monday the 27th at about 7 a.m., we're expecting ceilings at 500 feet, and then at 10 a.m. they're going to come up to about 2,800? It's so tiny I can't read it.
Yeah.
And then the ceilings are going to move up from there. So this is like a really great view, and I know there's some charts on like the sky view for on the CONUS cloud charts on aviationweather.gov, and even ForeFlight, you have those options on the CONUS clouds. But man, windy is a great way to look and be like, wow, there's not going to be hardly any clouds in the sky on such and such a day. So, that's kind of a baseline planning. And then I narrow it down. I still look at windy the day of, and then I'll look at the TAFs and METARs the day of. And if it's like really close to being bad, then I'll start pulling up the prog charts and seeing like, okay, is there like a front moving in? What's causing this? Because then that helps you decide like, well, are these thunderstorms that are rolling in, or is this like a warm front where we're going to see like really, really low ceilings? And then from there, then you progress. Like I like to progress and see exactly what type of weather that we're going to be seeing, and then from there, I might get another weather briefing as well. But typically, I'm more of a self briefing, and then finally, I'll just skim over like the ForeFlight weather briefing product to, kind of confirm what I've seen. But that's just my 2 cents. Hello from Brazil. Wow. Also, can you use Windy to find the weather for your check ride? Sure. We were just having this conversation the other day, weren't we?
Yeah, so yeah, you absolutely could. So let me pull up I'm going to pull up the aceguide again. And we're going to navigate over to, let's see. So on the aceguide, I've got the 9192. This is the pilot's pre-flight briefing guide. And the FAA used to have a basically mandatory weather services that you had to use, but they no longer do that. And instead they released this advisory circular that just has a checklist. And these are the things that it recommends that you get for an Outlook briefing, a standard briefing, abbreviated, and then your non-weather related checklist items. So whether you're getting that information from Windy or aviationweather.gov or the Weather Channel, like it doesn't really matter. You can get your weather from wherever you want to get your weather from. Now for a check ride, I would say at least know how to get the aviationweather.com or .gov information.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously kind of the FAA baseline weather. But if you want to enhance your situational awareness using the stuff from Windy and you're more comfortable doing that, then yeah, absolutely. You can use whatever weather you want.
Do you allow the aceguide on your check ride?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I use the aceguide on every check ride. And yeah, if my applicant wants to use it, no problem at all. It's all FAA source data that's kept up to date. So like, for instance, the weather handbook updated about a week ago. And so I pushed out version 7 that has that updated weather guide.
Yeah, and if you want to test the ACE guide, a good option is you can get my interactive version on freepilottraining.net, and there's just like an interactive weather guide on there. It's only $5, so try that out and see if you like the way that feels, and then maybe if you want to jump in and get the ACE guide, it has a lot more information in there, and it's like a lot more complete guide, so that's a really great option. Hello from Vancouver, British Columbia. Hey, I've been there.
Vancouver.
Great area.
Man, we're getting out there.
I didn't realize Canadians liked me so much.
All right.
All right, TAFs and METARs. You guys have been good. Let's see here. Our last thing, you want to study everything PPL related. Yeah.
Yeah, the question was from Suit Life 25. Honestly, don't know what I'm expected to know, meaning what key things should be focused on earlier more than others, and how would I see where I stand practice testing. So basically, you're just saying, hey, you're overwhelmed, and that's totally normal to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, drinking from a fire hose is pretty common. One of the things I'll say is that my ground course, I try to add as much stuff that you can actually use on the checkride as possible. And so I tie a lot of that in with flying. And so what you'll see with, like, for example, maintenance is a big deal on the checkride. And I have a particular maintenance video. I think that video is like 45 or 50 minutes long. But to be honest, those maintenance questions might not come up so much on your written exam, but they will come up on the checkride. You're going to get asked some questions about maintenance. You can get that VFR. You can get that required equipment items. That has a lot of the things you need to know for the maintenance items, like the Aviate acronym. So the inspections you need. Also, maintenance has a lot to do with the equipment you need as well, and like what can be broken and what can't, and like is this airplane airworthy, basically.
Yeah, essentially the answer is that's a job for your instructor to help break down this complex thing that is learning how to fly an airplane and break it down into digestible pieces. And we really can't answer that question on a live stream. You've got to, the whole analogy of how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So don't get overwhelmed, just focus in on one thing at a time. And eventually it'll come together, but you're going to need some patience.
And actually a really good point too is just to go line by line in the Airman Certification Standards. Because if you go line by line, and there's not that many pages, was there like 50 pages in there? And it literally tells you the knowledge requirements for your check ride in the Airman Certification Standards. So if you go down that line and see like, oh, I need to have this knowledge about soft field landings. Seth's guide literally has the references in the ACE guide. So that's a really great option, because you just look in the Airman Certification Standards where they're going to ask you questions about these things and be like, oh, I need to know this. So then you click the button and then you study it right then and there. That's how, one bite at a time.
Yeah, Brian Siskind, he's got a good question. Confusing thing for me, when I was a new pilot, and perhaps even still, as I'm working on my commercial, is the difference between weather minimums versus definitions. So, Brian, can you? I think I know where you're going with that.
Yeah, I'm not really
sure. But on the weather minimums, are you talking about weather minimums for like a particular approach or a type of airspace that you're in versus the definition? I know I covered this before, where everybody's seen the red dots on the blue, green, red, pink dot that's on the METAR. Those are actually advisory in nature only.
Yeah.
So if you see an airport with a red dot on it, it does not mean that that airport is IFR only.
Yeah.
It just means that the conditions at that airport favor IFR activity. Depending on the airspace that airport's in, it may or may not actually be IFR. It may be, if it's a Class G airport, you only need 1 mile clear clouds.
Yeah.
So that red dot triggers whenever the ceiling's below 1,000 or the visibility is below 3. So in that case, the ceiling and visibility could both be under 1,000 and less than 3, and the Class G airport's still VFR, but it's going to have a red dot on it. So that is confusing, and I don't know if that's what you're talking about there, Brian, or not.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys caught it, but at the beginning of this video, I was talking about taking off out of, I keep thinking this is North Little Rock, but this is Conway. But I took off when I did my check ride. I took off, and the ceilings were right at 1,000 feet, and I don't know what the blue and red dot was showing at the time, but it was at least showing blue, and so like I knew that I was totally legal Right, yes. What is VMC, VFR, flight category, etc.?
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully I touched on that a little bit, but the thing to remember is those red, blue, pink, green dots, those are just advisory. What is controlling is in Part 91 in your flight category of your weather minimums as far as your cloud clearance requirements.
Yeah,
And
91,
so,
155.
yeah, and then to make even more confusing for you, Brian, especially going in as your commercial pilot, those change depending on the type of activity you're doing. So if you're doing a Part 91 operation, you could take off when it's 0, 0. There is no weather minimums for IFR for Part 91. There's just not any.
Yeah.
You could take off with 0 ceiling, 0 visibility, and not break any rules. If you're on a 135 flight, then you absolutely have takeoff minimums, but those could change depending on your 135, your operation specifications, the airport that you're at. Like it just gets more confusing. So I'm right there with you. That's a confusing topic. It kind of goes back to that other thing we were saying is just take it a piece at a time. And so learning the Part 91 regulations of there's really not any minimums as long as you're IFR, and then building up from there.
Yeah, and then you also have VMC versus VFR. VMC is kind of a squishy word because that's just saying that, hey, we have visual meteorological conditions. I can barely say that word, but that's just basically saying like, hey, the weather is good enough to fly under visual flight rules. That's basically what that's saying. And then visual flight rules are you maintaining those legal cloud clearances. And we talked about it a little bit when we talked about the airspace, but specifically, maintaining those clearances so, an IFR pilot doesn't pop out and run into you because you're too close to the clouds. Because, if somebody's flying through clouds and then you're closer to that cloud than you should be, then they might pop out and not have any time to avoid you. And so that's the whole point in that is we want to build more spacing between us and somebody that might be flying in the clouds, somebody that might be flying in the weather, because when they're in visual meteorological conditions, it's not as big a deal because they can see you. But when they're in instrument meteorological conditions, then it is a big deal. So that's kind of the reason for that.
Yeah, and so XC042, what's the difference between VFR airspace weather minimums and the requirement of 1,000 ceiling and 3 miles visibility? So you're right there, that, the way you asked that question shows me that you might be confused a little bit, and that there's room for confusion here, so that's not a problem at all. The 1,000 foot ceiling and 3 miles visibility, that's where we have the marginal VFR, the blue dot, is from 1,003 to 5,005 or 3,005. And then anything above 5 miles visibility to 3,000 foot ceilings, anything above that turns into a green dot. That's the thing that's not legally binding. That's just an advisory note letting you know, hey, there's that.
I think what they're talking about is the basic VFR minimums. And what that is that's different because I can't remember the reg. Now I have to look it up here, and I was trying to find it here. But what it says is that in airspace where class Echo or Delta or Charlie goes to the surface,
correct,
then you do have those minimums. But in class Golf, when there's class Golf underneath class Echo, that 1003 doesn't apply. So then you'd still have the one and clear of clouds. The ceilings could be 100 feet in class Golf, and you could literally take off as long as you're
clear clouds
and one statute mile visibility. So that's the difference there.
Yeah. So what he's saying basically is that is true in all airspace except Golf, the 1,003. All airspace except Golf, that's your baseline VFR. And it just depends on where you've trained. A lot of places, there's hardly any Golf. If you live up in the Northeast, there's almost no Golf airspace. It's all class Echo. So in that case, 1,003 is kind of your basic VFR. But if you're out with us, out in the boonies in Arkansas, there's a lot of airspace here that is not 1,003. It's 1 mile clear of clouds in class G
and
there.
That's why you get these now, I can't pull it up right now, but that's why you get those airports sometimes where it's a dotted magenta line going around an airport because the class Echo is going all the way to the surface at that particular airport. And that's probably because they have special instrument approaches there. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to build a little bit more spacing for those instrument pilots. And so because of that, you do have the minimum weather. You have to have 1,000-foot ceilings and 3 statute miles of visibility at that particular airport. But you know, if it's just the hazy magenta ring, then theoretically, if you stay in the class Golf, then you know you just need the 1 statute mile and clear of clouds. So that's the difference there. What else we got here? Any more questions before we move on to the last
Yeah, let's go for
topic?
it. We're on the last topic up there with performance charts.
Performance charts. So a lot of you guys said that performance charts are super duper confusing to you. And believe me, I understand. It can be really confusing, especially when you get into higher performance airplanes where you get the big spaghetti charts. I remember in pilot training, they showed us the spaghetti charts and I was like, there's no way I'm passing this. I'm failing for sure. Yeah. Yeah, let's see what comments you guys have.
Let's see, I was gonna pull this.
Okay, yeah, so this is a spaghetti chart. What is this from?
This is a Beechcraft Bonanza spaghetti chart. Throw that up on the screen and then let's see if we got any questions here.
I have more questions.
And more questions. Yeah, we gotta move on.
Maybe we need to do another live stream at some point.
Yeah. Weather minimums. Check out my channel. I did a video on airspace and another one on weather pretty recently. It was within the last like 5 videos.
And that's Seth Lake. I'll try to put a link. Wait, is there a description on live stream videos?
I think there is. I think if you go to there's a link to my website, and then it'll eventually take you to the YouTube channel. You can check that out.
After this live stream is over, as soon as I can, I'm going to, yes, please do another live stream. Thank you. As soon as this video is over, as soon as we can, I'm going to upload this as a video so you guys can watch it.
It's lightning out there.
Yeah, speaking of weather, it's pretty crazy out there. But I'll upload this and I'll put a link to Seth's channel down there because there's a lot of really good information on his stuff. And to be honest, sometimes I have to like look at his videos to see what's what, you know, but I'm kind of dumb.
So what I'm gonna do, my input here, I know we've been doing this a while, so I've got my stuff that I'm gonna do for performance charts. Again, I'm all about practical stuff. So, and then Josh is going to get into the details of some really good advisory circular here. But I'm going to pull up this screen here and show you a spaghetti chart. So this is kind of a more advanced chart here.
This is going to be a lot harder one, but
but this is from an A36 Bonanza. So we're not talking like this is not a 747. This is a general aviation aircraft chart. And what I like to do that I wanted to share with you guys is when you're running these, a lot of us are running them on digital. And so most digital PDF readers, you can go up here to your comment and you can draw shapes. Yeah, and drawing squares is actually one of my favorite ways to run these charts. Because if my temperature is 0, I can run 0, and then I get a perfectly straight line there. So you can kind of see conceptually how I would run this chart, is I can just progressively draw boxes, and I know I've got 90-degree perfectly straight lines, and I would add those series of boxes until I reach the side of the chart that gives me the solution that I'm looking for. So that's just something I wanted to share with you guys. That's my favorite hack on how to do performance charts, are those boxes on your iPad so you can get those correct answers there.
Hello, Mr. Seth Lake. Can you please make more ACS videos on CFI covering the whole ACS, please? I think you've got a lot of videos on that over on your channel.
Yeah,
don't you?
there's I just recorded episode 2 on the CFI ACS, and that'll be coming out this weekend sometime. So stay tuned.
This person actually says something kind of good. Oh, geez, I do know how to run these charts, but I always get the answer wrong. So the big takeaway on these charts, and I always have to remind myself when it comes to spaghetti charts, is looking at the sample. If you're not looking at the sample, then you're wrong, because sometimes they work backwards from what you're thinking, and they literally give you the answer key by, this isn't like a trick or anything. They literally want you to run the correct numbers. So when I look at the spaghetti charts, I always look at the sample and see what they show you, because like if a line goes up and then over, then I know like, okay, well, I need to start, you know, at the temperature and then go up and then go over from there. So in this case right here, the sample goes up to a pressure altitude from the temperature and then straight over. And then from there, it starts at the next one. So they literally give you the answer key.
Yeah, so here's what we're talking about are these little examples of how to run it. So that's basically your tutorial on the spaghetti chart of how to run it. And then what I find is using this box method is way more accurate than kind of using your finger, like tracing it along. It's giving you the perfect 90-degree angles. And then the nice thing about it is once you're done, you leave those boxes there and you can just easily move them around for the next round.
I think another thing that a lot of people miss and a lot of people forget too is if you look in these charts, a lot of them have notes at the top and the bottom, and if you forget those notes, then you're screwed, because it might say like add 25% for grass or something like that. And actually this raises a really good point, because there's some things on those charts that don't exist. If you'll bring that advisory circular up. A couple years ago, I was actually up in Alaska, and for the last 2 years, I've been up in Alaska. And one of my students, while I was up there, he asked, hey, what should we do if the runway is covered with ice? Because up there, operations don't stop if there's ice on the runway. And to be honest, I didn't know the answer at the time, and so kind of went into research mode and started looking around. And this is actually a really good advisory circular right here. It's AC 9179 Bravo. And this is just a snapshot of one of the charts in this advisory circular. And basically what this advisory circular says is that, what does it say, 15% there, I think? I'll have to pull it up here. So when you run your charts, obviously you still add the numbers for, you know, if it says like add 25% for grass, you still add that. If it says add 10% for gravel, whatever, you still add those. But then what this says is that you should also always add a 15% safety margin. So I'm not going to do public math here because I'll embarrass myself, but I'd pull out a calculator and add 15% or multiply that times 1.15. But for, you know, let's say the runway condition code is 6 and it's dry outside, then this 1 point, so we got the reciprocating engines on the far left right here on the bottom row. So what it's saying here is if the runway is completely dry, you should really be taking those numbers and multiplying times 1.67 to give you an accurate representation of what you can expect. And that gives you that 15% safety buffer by using these FAA numbers. So like if I keep thinking the dash one, if the flight manual or the POH says, I need 1,000 feet, then if the braking action is 6, then I would just multiply that times 1.67. And so I'd really need 1,670 feet. So, and actually if you'll pull that chart back up real quick, this is where the question came like, hey, what should I do if there's ice? Well, this is exactly why the ATIS and the AWOS and stuff, and a lot of times they'll report the braking action, they'll report the runway condition code. A lot of times you'll hear runway 5, 5, 5 on the ATIS, or sometimes you'll see that 5/5/5. That means that the braking action's good, but if you look up here and you see a 2, because there's ice on the runway or something, then really, if I need 1,000 foot of runway ordinarily, then I need 4,000 according to this chart. So braking action is really important, and I think a lot of instructors don't really talk about this too much, but then you have the three numbers, because this is something else we don't talk about, but 555 is the beginning of the runway and the middle of the runway and the end of the runway, because actually the runway is divided up into three parts, and you could have potentially more runway, like there could potentially be one part of the runway that's a 1. What is it? Is it 0 that they have to close the runway down? Is that the legal requirement?
I don't actually know.
I'm pretty sure at 0 they have to close the runway down, because when I was in Alaska, I think they had 1s on the runway there, and I was like, this is about as slick as it gets right here. But they didn't put 0, and I thought, well, and I looked it up. I'm pretty sure 0 they have to close the runway, but maybe that was AI answering my question. I don't know. But
no, it could be. I've never seen a 0, but it is common, and I'm trying to pull up, just in case y'all have never seen this, I'm trying to pull up a METAR here real quick, or a digital ATIS that'll have it on ForeFlight actually. So if I can pull this up, you can keep pontificating over there.
Yeah, pontificating. Yeah, so this, when I was, when we were up there, the first time I flew and we did landings on the ice, I thought, well, you know, this is a Cessna 172. We don't need that much runway, but it does kind of make you wonder how much you actually need, because these numbers aren't in the chart. So once again, that advisory circular is 9179 Bravo. That's a really good starting point. And it has actually a lot of good information on performance stuff and how to run the numbers. Yeah, what do you got there?
All right, let's see. If we can pull up the Little Rock ATIS. Yeah,
oh, perfect.
There we go.
And it happens to be raining today, so yeah, we get to see that.
Let me change this over to ForeFlight. All right. So where we're looking is wait, don't go away on me.
ForeFlight is in danger. What are the alternatives?
Okay. So what you're seeing here is the ATIS, and so we have ATIS Golf, and then we have 555 wet all. So that's saying that all the runways are wet. Well, not all of the runway is wet. So your beginning, middle, and end point of the runway are all braking condition good. And so using what the runway condition code decoder that Josh has here. So since they're all good, we would go up here, we're a runway condition code 5, and then we have to decide, is this a grooved runway or this a smooth runway? Most of your Class Charlies are a grooved runway, and what that means is there's grooves in it, so it's going to help the water dissipate, so you'll have better braking action. So notice how a 5 good, we're going to add 230% to our told data, or our length of stopping distance or takeoff distance. We're going to add that margin there. So it's a multiplier. So if you needed 1,000 feet of landing distance, then you would take 1,000 and multiply it by 2.3 and come up with 2,300, right? 2.3?
Yeah.
So instead of 1,000 feet, you need 2,300 feet. If you were going to a smooth runway with 5 braking margin, it would be 2,600 feet. And that's because that water doesn't dissipate there. So that's how you would use the runway condition code identifier in a ATIS broadcast or a digital ATIS, however you're getting that. If the airport isn't calling one, then you can assume that it's 6, the condition code 6, which means it's dry.
Yeah.
But anything less than dry is going to have some sort of contaminant on it, be it water, ice. And so that little code book there that Josh has is actually really helpful. That lets you know we're the reciprocating aircraft, so we're always going to add one of these here. And so it's saying baseline, we're going to add 67%.
Yeah.
Safety margin.
And that adds the 15% safety margin in there. And I think the 15% safety margin, if you'll read in there, it basically is talking about, pilot error, because, I think we're all human beings, so sometimes you land a little long, and that's kind of the whole point in our training with private pilot's license and commercial pilot's license, where we're trying to get you to hit a spot, because when you actually go out there and you hack the mission, you might need to hit that spot in order to not invalidate your toll data.
Yeah.
I know for us as C-130 pilots, we have to land in the box. If you don't land in the box, you're going around because your toll data, you might not have enough runway.
Yeah.
So it's really important to land in the box.
Yep.
But all right, well, that's basically all we have, but I think we should probably take some questions. Do we have anything else to spill the beans before we take on some questions?
Yeah, we already got one here from Jensen DYT. What airport, when the airport diagram has RBWT for a runway, is that similar to the runway surface?
I'm not familiar with
Yeah,
those
I'll have to
codes.
see where it's on the airport diagram. We'll pull up an airport diagram here and see what you're talking about. And then Seth, you asked in a recent short, I'd love to get a deep dive on the 430 WAS, especially, apparently it's too old for anyone to make videos on it, and the 15-year-old videos aren't very good. We were just talking about this. So yeah, I've got a whole series planned for the 430, 530, 650, 750, G1000, and the G600. So just stay tuned to the channel. Those will be coming out.
Yeah, they'll be on Seth's channel. And once again, when I repost this as a video, not as a live stream, I'll put his channel in the description. So be sure to go over there because, yeah, he has a lot of good stuff when it comes to kind of the more technical side. And I'm just kind of the goofy guy that just teaches you guys like the basics.
Your stuff is so good compared to mine.
Let's see, airport diagram.
All right, I have pulled up the Dulles. We'll look through this together. So where is the R?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, I see what they're talking about right here.
Oh, down here. Those are your pavement category.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are your different, so PCR stands for your pavement category.
Condition reading?
Yeah, your pavement, yeah, something like that. So I would have to pull out I would have to do some research on that. But the short answer, no, that does not have anything to do with the runway condition. That's your weight-bearing capacity.
Yeah, what
for
this
that.
is, so I'll have to pull it up here. Actually, now that I look at it, this is actually the same codes that you get. There's a decoder for the chart supplement. I can't think of I have it on my iPad here. Let me just see if I can find it really fast. Let's see.
So what I think we're actually looking for is if we go to the airport.
Because what you have are the codes for like single tandem and that sort of thing. Because like a 2S is a single tandem. And I literally just found this out because, we could actually get the weight bearing capacity for like a C-130 in these locations off of the charts if it's like close to being a problem is what that's for. Let me see here.
Why isn't the chart supplement?
Here we go. This is, what is this called? Yeah, so this is actually, it says this is even for airport diagrams actually. So let me see if I can pull it up here. So look here in the IAC 8. So this is called the Flight Information Publication for the Chart Supplement. And actually there's a page specifically on airport diagrams, and so the airport diagrams actually breaks down the weight bearing those codes you're talking about. And I don't know all the W and the R and that sort of thing, but what I do remember is like the two, if you'll scroll down there, I don't know if there's a 2S on here. I don't know which ones are which, but like if you were to see a 2S, that's single tandem, so basically your wheel type. And then the 250 would be like 250,000 pounds. So that particular type of gear, that runway could take 250,000 pounds. But the R, B, W, and T, I actually don't know what those are. I'd have to look those up in this thing. But yeah, this book is called the Flight Information Publication Chart Supplement, the IAC8. And the most recent edition that I have is 27 October 2025. Let me see. This is a big book.
All right, we've got I fly. So we'll do. I might do a short on that. The RBWT. I think it does have to do with pavement,
Yeah,
but I need to do a short on how to find if it's grooved. The quickest way to do that without having Jeppesen, so using government stuff, and so that'd be a good thing to follow up with. All right, Dark Ginger 33, I fly a DA40NG and I'm having trouble on my landings. Keep flaring too soon, too hard. Any advice on how to know flare leave it more smooth with a stick? You've got something on landings,
Yeah,
don't you?
I actually have a whole book on landings. It's called The Triangle Method. So you can actually get a digital copy on freepilottraining.net, and the digital copy is only $10. And I'm getting a lot of people saying that it's actually really helping with their landings. And I also have a lot of videos that have a lot of tricks and tips on landings. But to answer that one particular question, what did he say? He was...
on flaring too soon or too hard.
Flaring too soon and too hard. So the flare is completely related to how quickly you're sinking. So basically, if you're flaring too soon or too early, that basically means that you're going to get a plopped-in landing, and so you're going to have to flare hard if you start sinking fast. Because if you flare too high, usually that means you're going to bleed off airspeed too quickly. So yeah, the triangle landing method.
So right here, this is the book. Ivan. You'll even see my logo on there. It's examiner approved. So he wrote this book, and I kind of helped him edit it a little bit and look through it. It pulls a lot of the information from. We need to figure out how to put links on here, you know.
Yeah.
But if you go to Red Yeti Aviation, just Google that.
Yeah, it's also on freepilottraining.net.
Yeah, freepilottraining.net.
And you can actually get the physical book on Amazon as well. And I think it's like $27 for a soft copy or something.
But generally, when I hear about bad landings, what's happening is the pilot is becoming fixated on something when you get closer to the ground. That's the overall root cause, is you become fixated on something. You might be getting fixated on airspeed. You might be getting fixated on your aim point because you're staring at this aim point on the runway coming down. Well, that aim point eventually has to shift. You can't just crash into the runway. Well, I guess you could do that once.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't want to do that very often.
Like a Harrier pilot.
So if you become fixated on your aim point, that's going to cause a poor landing. So what you want to do is transition and kind of look to the end of the runway, and you want to bring in your peripheral vision because you're using a lot of that ground rush with your peripheral vision. And if you're fixated on something, your brain's kind of blocking this out and you've got blinders on, and that can cause a bad landing.
Yeah, actually one of the things I mentioned in the book is you don't want to look at the end of the runway, you look towards the end of the runway, because what that does is it allows your peripheral vision, because what you're trying to accomplish is that your peripheral vision is really good at seeing relative movement. Because like if I'm looking at something, and they actually teach you this in ground training for your private pilot or any kind of rating, but if you look directly at something, it's hard to see relative movement. But if you catch it in your periphery, then you can actually see it a lot easier. And so what you're trying to accomplish is you're trying to feel like how quickly the airplane is sinking, and that rate at which you're flaring needs to be the exact same rate that you're sinking towards the runway. So that's kind of the thing.
All right, we got an easy question from XE042. They're wanting to know where the air for the vacuum instruments comes from. And so this is a good question. Your vacuum pump sits on your engine, and so the vacuum pump is creating the vacuum in the engine, and then it pulls that vacuum through the actual instrument. And if you look on the back of the instrument, seeing if we have, there used to be some in here actually. But if you look on the back of an instrument, there's a small hole that has a little kind of paperish looking filter. that's where the air is coming from. So your vacuum instruments are actually sucking air from behind the panel of your aircraft. That's where it's getting its air, is right there in the cockpit. So it's sucking air out of the cockpit, sort of. And that goes into the engine bay, and then it gets wasted out through the vacuum pump. But on some aircraft, some engineers are like, well, we're creating this vacuum, which means we're creating pressurized air.
Yeah.
So they trap that pressurized air, and that's what runs your pressurization system or de-icing boots. So some aircraft don't waste the vacuum pressure air. They actually go on to use it for other things like pressurization and de-icing. But that's a good question, but it comes from the cockpit.
What else we got here? We'll do a couple more, and then we'll let you guys have a good Friday evening here.
See if we missed any more. 430 WBT.
Are these? Oh, this is still talking about the runways.
Yeah, the runway conditions. Yeah. I don't see any up there. We'll give it a few more minutes, but hey, this has been fun.
Yeah, I've been having a good time. I didn't know what to expect with the live stream. I figured I'd just bundle it up, and I have a little bit, but yeah. Don't forget that the air filters are typically neglected and can clog up the instruments.
Yes, if you have an air instrument that's malfunctioning, one of the first steps is to make sure that filter isn't clogged, because that can cause a problem there.
Any tips for steep turns? Yeah, actually, I made a video on this not too long. Well, I guess it's been a couple years ago. But probably one of the biggest tips for me when I was going through pilot training, because when you're doing steep turns for the Air Force, you're literally in fingertip formation in like T6s, and so they're like, probably the first thing they taught us is like, once you're banked like this, you don't use the elevator to control altitude at that point. You need to use the ailerons because you're sideways. And so that was like a clicking moment for me, because in private pilot training, I remember I was always, and don't get me wrong, you have to pull G's so you don't descend. So you have to pull the exact right amount of G's. And if you're in a 45-degree bank, that's going to be 1.414 G's. But like, you also are actually controlling the ailerons. Or controlling your altitude with ailerons. So that's probably one of the biggest things.
Yeah. If I have a student that's struggling with this, one of my favorite hacks as an instructor is I put the plane in a perfect level steep turn at 45 degrees. And before I do that, I give the student a piece of tape that's about 4 inches long. And while we're in the steep turn, I have the student put that piece of tape on the windscreen where it's level with the horizon while we're turning. When we level out, you'll have a piece of tape that's kind of at an angle. And then I have them fly the airplane, and I tell them, hey, I want you to look at that piece of tape. I want you to roll until it's level with the horizon, and I want you to use enough back pressure to where you keep that piece of tape level with the horizon and just drag that tape across the horizon. And that gives, you want to eventually be able to move away from being reliant on that tape, but that will give you the mechanics down on how much back pressure it takes, and working on your coordination, but turn it into a visual maneuver, because I like to get the pilot's eyes outside versus looking inside. So that's a technique that you could try out with your instructor.
I never heard that tip before. That's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
All the instructors I've ever had were like, put the spinner on the horizon, put the spinner on the horizon. Yeah. And it might be the dash on, whichever side you're sitting on or whatever, but yeah. So through the cowling, I'm guessing, oh wait, they're still talking about that, that instrument.
I thought we answered that.
I've been absolutely terrified of power on stalls, like the way the wings drop, but still scared, but I'm doing it anyways. Any tips on that? The power on stalls, there's a couple tricks and tips. Probably the biggest thing for me is that like there's basically two types of power on stalls, and I feel like nobody ever talks about this, but one thing you should be practicing is takeoff stalls and cruise stalls, because like a lot of times we just say power on stalls, power on stalls. And if you start out with the takeoff stall, meaning like you slow the airplane down to your rotate speed first, and then once you do that, then you push the power up and pitch up. Those are a little bit easier because you're typically going to stall sooner. But if you do a cruise stall where you're like at 100 knots and then you just pitch the airplane up with full power, yeah, you're going to be looking at the sky for quite a while, and it can take some time to stall. And for me, I think the biggest takeaway is, one, making sure you're using the appropriate amount of rudder. But I think one of the biggest things that's helped me is if you have like a cloud directly in front of the airplane, you point towards that cloud, because that can help keep you on that heading.
Yep. And when I see this, that you're terrified of anything, that means that maybe you've had a bad experience with stalls, or maybe even your instructor needs to step in there and they need to remove that fear. And there's several different ways you can do that. But the best way is to practice the stalls and realize, hey, it's a controllable event. You can recover from them. Get very comfortable with the spin recovery, and just know that a spin is a very recoverable thing.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a death sentence, not even close. You can recover from a spin, and the spin happens in different phases too. So the first thing that happens when you feel that wing drop that kind of scares you, that's maybe the beginning of an incipient spin. And you can still recover from a spin before it even develops from that. And so all you have to do is unload the wing, and a plane at 0G or at very low G, you're drastically reducing your stall speed or completely removing it, and you're not going to stall. You get the nose down, you get power back in, back coordinated, everything's copacetic, no problems. So you need to handle that fear where you're not afraid of it. Because if you're afraid of something, you start to block stuff out, and now you're not learning if you're afraid. So handle that fear first, and then you'll get better at the power on stalls.
Yeah, another thing I would like to mention is that I think we as instructors a lot of times forget to mention why we're practicing these things. And the first reason is that so you can identify when you're getting close to a stall. And if your instructor isn't pointing out like, hey, there's the first indication because the stall horn's going off. Hey, there's the second indication because we're getting wing buffeting. Hey, your nose is about to drop. Your nose just dropped. If you're not getting those in the beginning, then you should be asking him, what are the indications of a stall and what should I be looking for? Because we don't want you to get these indications. The first time you get an indication, we want you to break the stall. So the reason why we take you all the way to the stall is so you'll know how the airplane acts in a stall. But in reality, we want you to recover before you even get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you want to do one more?
Yeah, let's do one more.
All right, we've handled some of these. Transitioning to the right seat.
Yeah, transitioning to the right seat. We can do that.
Yeah. All right, last question. So here's my tip. Transitioning to the right seat, it should be relatively easy for the landing. You've got to re-coordinate your hands a little bit. But definitely practice this. And that's all that it's going to take is some practice. The sight picture is the biggest thing. It's not the mechanics of what your hands are doing. It's your sight picture sitting in that right seat is going to be slightly different for all of the maneuvers. For the landing, it's a different enough that it can be distracting where your landings may suffer a bit when you first move over to the right seat. But the more you practice, it'll come back. And I don't think it takes too long to transition.
Yeah, for me it was the parallax, because you're looking over at the other gauge. You're looking at the gauges over here, and so you have to get a visual picture of where the gauge is. So in the beginning, I would look over there and see where I thought the gauge was, and then I'd lean over and verify where it was. And after a few times of doing that, then because the airspeed indicator is the most important thing when you're flying down final. Really, anytime, I think, in my personal opinion, but when you're trying to do performance maneuvers too. But the parallax was like a big thing for me.
Yeah. Well, I had a good time, Josh.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
I really appreciate somebody. I feel like we need to answer this one. Somebody said, please answer my last question. This will be the last one though, and then we'll get going. Do you think it would be a bad idea to try to become a military pilot if I'm struggling with PPL stuff? I don't know where you are in your stage, but if you're struggling in the beginning, it's not necessarily a big deal. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, first off, becoming a military pilot, it's a long process.
Yeah.
So it's not like you just decide, hey, I'm going to fly for the military and go to the recruiter's office, and then in a week you're at pilot training. It's probably like a 2-year process before you can even get into pilot training. So you have a lot of time to prepare for that, and it's also extremely competitive. So if you, it totally depends on where you're at in life. Like, are you in high school still? Are you in college? Obviously, you're going to need a college degree. So what I'm saying is that that's a valid thing for you to be concerned about, I guess. But there's a lot of other things that need to happen before you have to address that. So I would say take your time on what you're doing now, focus on your private pilot. That actually helps you get a pilot slot in the military.
I think too, probably one of the biggest things for me was that attitude was a huge part of succeeding in pilot training for the Air Force, because there's some really bad pilots that came through, and if somebody had a really good attitude, those instructors would take extra time to take care of those guys because they had a good attitude. They were willing to put in the work, and I think that's a big thing too. You need to be willing to put in the work, because if you're not willing to put in the work, you can just forget it, because it's a lot of work. There's a meme, I can't remember, there's a picture of Robin Olds in front of I think it's an F4, and it says, what does it take for how long does it take for the average person to become a fighter pilot? It says, average people don't become fighter pilots. So take that with a grain of salt, but it's true. So yeah.
All right, man. Well, that's good. Thanks for hanging in there with us. And if you're watching this later, we'll post this video, or Josh will post this video. So if you're watching it later, feel free to leave your comments on what you find most confusing, and then give us both feedback on if you'd like to see more live streams.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to, bear this great weather. And thank you guys. And we'll